WWF WrestleMania 13 took place on March 23, 1997 in the Rosemont Horizon in Chicago, Illinois, now renamed to the Allstate Arena. The show was attended by around 18,000 fans, and WrestleMania 13 has the distinction of having the lowest pay-per-view buy rate in WrestleMania history. A reported 237,000 homes bought the show on pay-per-view. WCW Nitro was doing great numbers during this time period, and many fans got their wrestling fix over on TNT. But the World Wrestling Federation were now beginning to really fight back with the rebranding of Monday Night Raw and their focus on more contemporary storytelling. They still have a long way to go, but WrestleMania 13 does have that 1997 pre-Attitude Era feel of WWF television, especially when compared to WrestleMania 12 and WrestleMania 11. WrestleMania 13's main event features Sycho Sid defending the WWF Championship against The Undertaker. We also have the critically acclaimed Bret Hart vs Steve Austin submission match, and a Chicago street fight is going to take place too, featuring Ahmed Johnson and the Legion of Doom taking on the Nation of Domination. I was going to use the Coliseum video release of WrestleMania 13 for this upload because I'm pretty sure the network version is from the WrestleMania Anthology box set, and I wasn't sure if those re-releases left anything out. But it turns out the network release actually has a longer runtime, with the original video release cutting out content, an example being Ken Shamrock's backstage interview being much shorter on the videotape due to the removal of WWF Raw footage. So let's get started then. This is WrestleMania 13. The WrestleMania Free-For-All show featured a Billy Gunn vs Flash Funk match. Gunn won the match with a Tornado DDT. Steve Austin cut a promo where he said he doesn't know a whole lot of submission moves, but he plans on beating up Bret Hart so bad tonight that the Hitman will have no choice but to give up. Stone Cold also said that Bret's been complaining a lot about getting screwed, and, well, Austin said this.
Let me just tell you this, son. I ain't bringing a condom to the ring. I'm bringing a hell of a can of whoop ass.
This really should have made it to the pay-per-view. Farouk and the Nation of Domination also had a backstage interview where Farouk said he's going to tie a rope around Ahmed's neck later on in the Chicago street fight. Vince McMahon had to apologise afterwards. And The Undertaker also spoke to the crowd without making a physical appearance. Undertaker said WrestleMania 13 will be Sycho Sid's final resting place, and tonight, in order to move forward, The Undertaker and the fans of the World Wrestling Federation will move back in time during the WrestleMania main event. The free-for-all can be skipped, but the Austin promo is worth hunting down. The pay-per-view then opened up with a 4-team elimination match. The Godwins versus the Headbangers versus Furnace and LaFawn versus the New Blackjacks. A tag can be made to any man. When a competitor is defeated, his team is eliminated, and the last team remaining will be the winners, and that team gets a title shot tomorrow night on Raw's War. We did get to see 2 members of the same team get tagged in at the same time. Mosh and Thrasher decided not to fight though, and Jerry Lawler told Vince McMahon that what we're seeing here is a mosh pit. The first teams eliminated were the New Blackjacks and Furnace and LaFawn. After Bradshaw performed this messy suplex to the outside, Bradshaw then pushed Mike Chioda, and our referee decided to disqualify Bradshaw and Wyndham. For whatever reason, this also led to Furnace and LaFawn getting eliminated too. Jim Ross says that they could have been counted out. So our 4-team elimination match then turned into a regular tag match with the Headbangers taking on the Godwins. And the Headbangers got a chance to show off what they could do while attacking the Godwins on the outside. Back inside the ropes, Thrasher misses a moonsault, and Phineas Godwin almost won the match when he went for a slop drop on Mosh. But Thrasher saved the day, allowing Mosh to hit a top rope bombs away on a standing Phineas Godwin. The Headbangers get a shot at the tag titles on Raw tomorrow night. It's certainly not one of my favourite WrestleMania opening matches, but it was a good showing from the Headbangers. It's just a shame that Furnace and LaFawn got eliminated so unceremoniously. Captain Lou Albano and Arnold Scotland are seen in the audience, and Captain Lou dances to the Honky Tonk Man's theme music. These fans sitting behind the Hall of Famers don't have a clue what the Captain is trying to do, but nonetheless, it looks like Captain Lou is having a lot of fun tonight. Honky Tonk Man is going to provide commentary for our next bout. The IC title match featuring champion Rocky Maivia and the Sultan. No story at all for this one. Bob Backlund and the Iron Sheik randomly announced that the Sultan was #1 contender, and Tony Atlas stopped Maivia from fighting the Sultan on the previous episode of Raw. The Sultan, quite simply, had done very little on TV as a character to deserve a IC title shot, but well, here we are. Both superstars don't get much of a reaction during the entrances, but credit to Maivia, he does try to get them into it before the match begins. Sultan puts the champ down with a shoulder block and Maivia keeps up afterwards. Rocky then lands a few punches before hitting the Sultan with a clothesline and a dropkick. Sultan ends up on the outside, and the referee stops Maivia from launching an aerial attack from the top rope. The crowd then begins chanting "Rocky sucks" as the Sultan pulls Maivia out of the ring. Rocky lays in more right hands, but he eventually ends up clotheslining the ring post. That's twice he's done that now. Honky Tonk Man gets all fired up, or all shook up, as Sultan uses the guardrail to hurt Maivia, and when the match gets back in the ring, Sultan floors Rocky with a few clotheslines. After taking this beating, Rocky kicks out at 1. Maivia was good in the ring, but he was still doing things like this. The crowd continues to chant "Rocky sucks" as Sultan applies a nerve hold. The two men get back up and Sultan puts Maivia down again with a knee to the midsection, and then the Sultan pulls off a diving headbutt, the first move that got a decent crowd reaction. Rocky then tries a sunset flip and we get a little Aloha Sultan action. Sultan avoids getting pinned, but he still manages to put Rocky down with a belly-to-belly suplex. We then see the Wrestling Bio's favourite, the dreaded chin lock, and this one stays locked in for a solid minute and a half. The crowd chanted "boring" and they booed the match, and I don't remember the audience being so hostile towards the two competitors. Both men go down after a double clothesline, and matters aren't helped when both guys stay down on the mat. Rock fires back afterwards and he gets all excited after a few punches. Sultan then takes a belly-to-belly, which did look pretty good, and Rock then hits his float-over DDT. Again, this looked good. Rock takes to the skies for a crossbody, but the Iron Sheik distracts Earl Hebner when Sultan gets pinned. Rock is able to stop the Sultan from getting a cheap shot in, but he doesn't stop the Sultan from nearly kicking his head off with a sidekick. Maivia gets hit with a pile driver, and moments later, the match ends when Rocky counters a slam, and he performs a schoolboy pin, scoring the 1, 2, 3 and ending a match that fans couldn't have cared less about. The Sultan attacks Maivia during a post-match interview, and Maivia takes a beating from the Sultan and the Iron Sheik. This eventually leads to Soul Man Rocky Johnson hitting the ring to help his son. When the Sultan begins attacking Johnson, Maivia gets back to his feet and the bad guys get taken out. I'm sure this is a great memory for Dwayne Johnson, and I'm sure he was very excited for this moment back in 1997, but you gotta be honest too, The Rock's WrestleMania debut was seriously underwhelming, and the fans were rapidly turning on Maivia. It was getting worse week after week. Ken Shamrock gets interviewed backstage and we see clips of Ken embarrassing Billy Gunn on Raw. As mentioned, these clips were removed from the Coliseum video release. Shamrock talks us through the armbar and ankle lock submissions, saying he didn't want to hurt Billy, he just wanted Gunn to know who he was and who he was dealing with. Because he knows a thing or two about submissions, Ken feels he's the right man to referee the Hart vs Austin match tonight. He says he won't let Bret or Stone Cold intimidate him or sway him in making an unfair call. Shamrock is at WrestleMania to call the match right down the middle and raise the winner's hand when all is said and done. Doc Hendricks then interviews Triple H in China, and Doc wants to know more about Hunter's relationship with China. Triple H says Doc doesn't need to know anything about her, and he leaves it at that. As for tonight and as for Goldust, Hunter will make easy work of the bizarre one, but the big loser will be Marlena tonight. This whole feud started when Marlena turned down Triple H's advances at In Your House It's Time, and Hunter says Marlena had her chance and she turned it down. Now Marlena has to worry about China standing at ringside. These two also had an Intercontinental title match back at the Royal Rumble, and it was a pretty scrappy match. Let's see how they do here at WrestleMania. Goldust surprises Hunter with a clothesline and he instantly goes on the attack. From here, it's all Goldust and Hunter can't get started at all. Goldust brings Helmsley to the corner where China gets spat on and Hunter gets a big old kiss on the lips. And then Hunter gets clotheslined out of the ring after taking an inverted atomic drop. On the outside, Triple H gets tied up in the ropes, giving Goldust a few free shots right to Hunter's nose. And Triple H takes a big kick to the face before getting clotheslined back into the ring. I thought this spot looked great. Triple H finally fights back with a facebuster. China keeps a close eye on Marlena as Hunter's short comeback gets stopped with a power slam. but Hunter is then able to counter a superplex reversal and Goldust gets dumped to the outside. The cameras focus on Chyna again, making fans wonder if she's gonna strike, but Goldust ends up getting thrown back inside by Triple H and Hunter comes off the top rope with a diving forearm. Hunter then exposes the chest of Goldust and a few hard knife-edge chops gets followed up by a mudhold stomping in the corner. Now in the driver's seat, Hunter hits a neckbreaker before applying an abdominal stretch. The hold is broken by Kyoto and Goldust lands a hip toss, but Hunter comes back with a running knee strike. The crowd is absolutely silent here. Usual spots that would get good reactions, like Goldust getting the knees up to smash Hunter's little King of Kings here. This is met with a smattering of applause, and it's not like Goldust and Triple H were doing anything wrong here. The fans just didn't care. It ends when Chyna begins approaching Marlena. Hunter and Goldust counter pedigree and curtain call attempts, but Goldust ends up setting Marlena up on the apron for safekeeping, probably the worst place she could have been. Hunter hits another running knee strike and this causes Marlena to fall into a Chyna bear hug. Hunter hits a pedigree in the ring while Marlena gets thrown around like a rag doll. And that's how this one ended. I think the WWF were expecting some sort of round of applause for Goldust and Marlena or some showing of sympathy, but there's nothing here. It's another painfully average match at WrestleMania. The Tag Team Championships were on the line next, Vader and Mankind getting a shot at Bulldog and Owen's belts. The WWF played up to the underlying problems between Owen and Davey that began back at the Royal Rumble, with Jim Ross asking the champs if there's some jealousy here and asking who the leader of the team is. Owen says he's the leader while Davey says that he's actually the leader. Clearly the champs were having issues, but they didn't want to address them. Owen is now a 2-time Slammy Award winner also. He stole his second award at the Slammy show 2 nights prior. As for Big Van Vader and Mankind, they're simply a tag team because they share the same manager. I never thought Vader and Paul Bearer was a good pairing at all. And as I mentioned on Reliving the War, I think there were better ways to use all the excellent talent that's in this matchup. Fortunately though, this tag match got the fans back into the show. Vader and Owen started things off and Owen was able to keep control of the match during the opening moments, but it didn't take long for Vader to fight back. A big powerbomb put an end to Owen's offensive flurry. Davey and Mankind then came into the match and the crowd popped when Owen and Bulldog put both of their opponents down. Davey then hit suplexes on both Mankind and Vader. The Vader suplex was a sight to behold. And we also got a WrestleMania sized chin lock from Davey Boy Smith. You normally don't see these in Bulldog tag matches, so it was a special night indeed. And it's WrestleMania, let's do it.
Davey Boy Smith chinlock.
On the outside, Mick Foley tried to take Davey out with the Undertaker's urn, but Davey hit a drop toe hold. The referee was too busy with Owen on the apron, so Vader rushed over and Bulldog ended up taking a shot to the head. From here, Vader and Mankind maintained control while keeping Davey away from his corner. Quick tags by the heels ensured that Owen couldn't get tagged in for an extended period of time, but when he did eventually get back in the match, the King of Hearts was all fired up and the crowd cheered for Owen. The tag champs definitely worked babyface here, and this isn't the first time they've done that either. Eventually, Owen takes a beating on the outside while Stu and Helen Hart watch on from their ringside seats. The match gets back inside the ropes and this time it's Owen who needs to make a tag. The challengers have worked better as a tag team tonight, and the champions have had to take opportunities to tag out rather than create opportunities. Owen ends up on the outside again and he hits a belly-to-belly suplex on the outside right in front of his parents. Mankind and Bulldog end up the legal men inside the ring, but Vader knocks Owen into Davey and this causes the Bulldog and Foley to fall out of the ring. Mankind applies the mandible claw and the referee ends up calling for the bell. We have a count-out finish this time and the crowd weren't happy with the outcome. Owen has to pry Mankind away from Davey and Vader tries to attack Owen. Eventually the challengers are sent to the back while Owen and Davey hobble over to their tag belts and Slammy awards. So far this was the best match on the card, but that isn't saying much either. WrestleMania 13 was in danger of being a very forgettable pay-per-view, but then it was time for the Bret Hart vs Steve Austin submission match. Since coming back to the World Wrestling Federation, Bret Hart has had a lot of problems with Stone Cold Steve Austin. At In Your House It's Time, Austin attacked Bret during a WWF title match. At the Royal Rumble, Austin got eliminated, but he jumped back into the ring while referees weren't looking, and he ended up eliminating Bret Hart to win the match. But maybe the worst thing Austin did to Hart was cost him the WWF Championship 24 hours after the Hitman won the belt at In Your House Final 4. Not only was Bret dealing with Stone Cold Steve Austin, he also had issues with Shawn Michaels dating back to WrestleMania 12. Shawn too had played a part in costing Bret the championship back at In Your House It's Time. And Bret had become very vocal about how he was getting screwed and how there was no justice in the World Wrestling Federation. Bret was right though, he was getting screwed over, but the constant complaining was highlighted by Steve Austin on TV, and fans were beginning to realise that Austin had a point. Bret was doing a whole lot of crying. Bret vs Austin was almost a WWF Championship match at WrestleMania, but Sid was able to beat Bret Hart in a steel cage match on Raw. Austin tried to help the Hitman in order to get a shot at the title, but the Undertaker made sure that he stayed in the main event by closing the cage door in Bret's face. After the bout, Bret went on a verbal tirade, ripping into Vince McMahon and the World Wrestling Federation, and talking about everyone turning a blind eye to what's been going on. Hart has promised to beat Austin to a pulp tonight, and Austin said he will never give up. Something has to give in this submission match, and there was a feeling of unpredictability heading into this bout. Ken Shamrock looks all business as he gets ready to referee this match. We see the iconic Steve Austin glass-shattering entrance as Austin makes his way to the ring, and it almost feels like we have a brand new audience inside the Rosemont Horizon. There's a real shift in atmosphere. Vince McMahon says Bret's getting a mixed reaction on his way to the ring, and I know Vince was trying to set up the story here, but from what we hear on TV, Bret gets a great reaction during his entrance. Bret steps inside the ropes and Austin takes him down right away. This won't be a wrestling match, it's gonna be a fight. The two men keep throwing punches as they roll out of the ring where the fight continues. Bret eventually throws Austin into the ring post, but Stone Cold replies by smashing Bret's little sharpshooter on the guardrail. Stone Cold then hits a clothesline while Bret's perched on the barrier, and Austin slams Bret's head into the steel right in front of Captain Lou and Tony Atlas. The two men then begin travelling through the audience where the fight continues, and Ken Shamrock has the task of keeping fans away from two of the WWF's most popular superstars. Austin takes a soft drink and he throws it all over the Hitman, and Vince McMahon says that Bret's falling right into Austin's trap here. This is the kind of fight that Austin can easily win. Things get frantic and it's hard to see what's going on at times. Bret backdrops Austin just before security assists both men in getting back to the ringside area. But what Bret and Austin successfully done here was get the whole crowd back into WrestleMania 13. This was the loudest Chicago had been since the beginning of the show. Hart drops a forearm on Austin and Stone Cold replies by throwing Bret into the ring steps. Bret takes a phenomenal bump here, absolutely no fear in hitting those steps as hard as possible. Austin keeps the pressure on with a diving attack from the apron, and Bret has to save himself from getting destroyed even further with the ring steps. Back inside the ring, Austin stomps on Bret's fingers, but Bret comes back with a swinging neckbreaker. We see the elbow drop from Bret's rope, and then it was time for Bret to begin working over the left leg. Bret does everything he can think of to weaken the leg, from using the ropes to his advantage to flat out punching the body part. The Hitman is getting vicious and he begins screaming for Austin to stand up. Hart gets too confident though. Austin dodges an attack and the Rattlesnake hits a Stone Cold Stunner, but pinfalls don't count here. Bret has to say he submits, and the Hitman doesn't give up just yet. Bret gets back up as Austin hobbles on one leg. Bret's able to bring Stone Cold back down by going after the damaged limb. The Hitman then goes to the outside and he grabs the ring bell, but he ends up leaving it on the apron before grabbing a chair. Bret gets back in the ring and he places the chair on Austin's ankle. He wants to Pillmanize Stone Cold Steve Austin. There's a loud gasp as Bret sets up the move. The Hitman then goes to the top rope, but Austin wakes up and Hart takes a chair shot. Take a look at this next chair shot and look at how Bret sells it. Absolutely brilliant. Austin keeps the pressure on with a suplex. We see Stone Cold's elbow drop from Bret's rope, and we get to see the Hart family's reactions as Steve brings it down to the mat and Bret gets his neck and arm stretched out. Austin then applies a Boston Crab and Shamrock forces a break when Bret makes it to the ropes, and Austin tries a sharpshooter afterwards, but Bret breaks it by raking Austin in the eyes. Austin throws Bret out of the ring and Stone Cold raises his arms up to the fans in attendance. There's a lot of support for Stone Cold tonight, but you can also hear a lot of fans booing Austin. Stone Cold goes to the outside and Bret manages to throw Austin into the guardrail. It's at this point where Bret blades Austin, and it's an impressive job too, by the way. Austin said he wasn't comfortable doing the blade job himself, so Bret did it for him. Vince McMahon had no idea it was going to happen. Hart throws Austin into the ring post and Stone Cold is an absolute mess. The match gets back inside the ring and the fans give a round of applause for what they're witnessing. Hart hits a backbreaker, we see another second rope elbow drop, and then Bret completely loses it and he begins destroying Steve's leg with a chair. Bret again gets vicious here. He wants to beat Austin into submission, but Austin simply won't give up. Stone Cold avoids a sharpshooter attempt, and when Bret brings the fight to the corner, Stone Cold gets out of danger by hitting a low blow on the excellence of execution. Bret then takes a turnbuckle bump chest first, and Steve Austin seriously fires up. The crowd cheers as Stone Cold destroys Bret in the corner and Stone Cold hits a superplex. Austin then decides he's going to choke Bret using some cable on the outside of the ring, and although it initially works, Bret grabs the ring bell he left on the apron earlier and Stone Cold gets clocked. This right here was the game changer. Bret had done enough damage, he was able to lock in the sharpshooter, and history is made when blood pours from Austin's face while locked in Bret's finishing move. Stone Cold screams in agony and he almost breaks the hold, but Bret locks it back in and the torture continues. Steve Austin can't make it to the ropes, he can't break the hold, but he won't give up. Bret has it locked all the way in and there's no escape for Austin. Stone Cold ends up passing out. Shamrock shouts if Austin doesn't answer him, he will end the fight. Stone Cold is now completely unresponsive, so Shamrock tells Bret to release the hold. The match is over, Bret wins, even though Stone Cold didn't submit. There was nothing else that Shamrock could have done. The story of the match doesn't end here though. Bret celebrates and he gets a great crowd reaction too. All Bret had to do now was walk away, but all those times Austin screwed him over, all those times Austin took away Bret's opportunities, it all comes rushing back and Bret decides to beat Austin up while Stone Cold is still down. Shamrock has to step in to stop Bret applying another sharpshooter, and the crowd pops huge when Shamrock hits a belly-to-belly suplex. Bret Hart and Ken Shamrock then square off. Bret considers his next move, and Hart decides to walk away and leave the ring. The crowd then boos Bret. Not only did Bret literally kick a man while he was down, but he also backed down from a fight. Bret flips off a fan as he walks back up the entranceway, and Stone Cold refuses help inside the ring. This right here was the icing on the cake. Stone Cold hits a stunner on Mike Chioda and Steve Austin leaves the ring all on his own. He's been beaten up badly, he's in a lot of pain, but he didn't give up and he didn't ask for, nor does he want anyone's help. A loud Austin chant breaks out and Stone Cold lifts his head up to look at the audience before leaving. An absolute bona fide wrestling classic, the greatest double turn in the history of the business. Stone Cold Steve Austin was now a made man and a main event caliber superstar. And as for Bret Hart, well, the Hitman was going to answer a lot of questions tomorrow night on Raw. Bret may have won the match, but he just lost a ton of fan support. What a story and what a match. This was brilliant. Whew, my. WrestleMania just got a shot in the arm and it isn't the next match that suffers, it's actually the main event that falls victim to the match schedule. Because the Nation of Domination versus LOD and Ahmed Johnson is contested under street fight rules, they can get away with getting cheap pops by just using weapons. Sid and The Undertaker have to follow two matches that were absolute balls to the wall, and it makes things a little tough for the WWF Champion and the Phenom. Farouk gets interviewed backstage and Todd Pettengill comments on all the weapons the Nation has backstage. Todd says the Nation has everything but the kitchen sink, and Farouk says just wait and see. Vince McMahon again says the Nation has brought everything but the kitchen sink during the Nation's entrance, so you just know someone's gonna have a sink with them during the match. And right enough, it's Road Warrior Hawk that brings it out. Ahmed Johnson is wearing some Legion of Doom spikes, and interesting story, Road Warrior Animal accused Johnson of stealing the spikes after the match. Ahmed says they were given to him by Road Warrior Hawk, and he sent them away to be displayed in the Dallas Sportatorium, which, by the way, was demolished after a fire caused irreparable damage in late 2001. Whatever the case may be, I thought Ahmed wearing the spiked shoulder pads was a nice touch. And I'm not going to talk about this move for move because it's just pure chaos. Nation lackeys PG-13 and D'Lo get taken out at the beginning of the match. Ahmed Johnson performs a fucking somersault plancha over the guardrail onto Crush. And check out Hawk's smooth recovery here when he loses grip of the 2x4. Good work. A piledriver attempt by Animal to Farouk doesn't go too well on the French announce table, and Farouk getting sprayed with a fire extinguisher doesn't get picked up by the cameras, although we do get to see it in instant replay. You kinda gain a new appreciation for the WCW split screen as the chaos unfolds. Ahmed finds himself getting tied up with a rope, but Road Warrior Animal runs in to save the day. Ahmed batters Farouk with a parking sign a few times, but this isn't the worst thing that happens to the Nation's leader during this match. This spot here ended up giving Farouk a separated shoulder, and he'd be out of action afterwards for around 2 months. Ahmed hits a spinebuster on Farouk as Hawk uses the fire extinguisher on the outside, but the remaining members of the Nation stop Johnson from performing the Pearl River Plunge. The babyfaces make quick work of their opponents though, with Crush taking a Doomsday device, and this gets followed up with a 2x4 to the face. Animal pins Crush afterwards, and that's how it ended. The fight continued after the bell. Farouk is kept away from danger as D'Lo takes a Pearl River Plunge, and then we see a double Doomsday device on PG-13. This was fantastic. This bout kept the fans pumped up after the submission match, and those in attendance had a great time watching the Chicago street fight, but now Sid and The Undertaker had the main event the show by bringing it back to basics with a one-on-one match. Could they pull it off while keeping fans invested? Let's find out. Undertaker was named the #1 contender after In Your House Final 4, and Taker had to do all he could to protect his title shot, even getting involved in the aforementioned Raw Steel Cage match. Before Shawn Michaels forfeited the WWF Championship, I'm not sure The Undertaker would have been in the running for a title shot at WrestleMania, but the road to Mania 13 was one with many bumps, and it all kinda worked out for the Phenom. This was The Undertaker's first ever WrestleMania main event. Not much story between these two at all. They had their standard run-ins on Raw and all that, but there's nothing substantial here at all. It's simply champion versus challenger to end the show. Shawn Michaels is here to provide commentary for the match. HBK is fond of sticking his nose into other people's business, so fans wondered how he was going to get involved in this one, but fortunately, Shawn stayed away from the ring. Remember how The Undertaker said he and the fans were going to go back in time in order to progress into the future? Well, the dead man came out wearing his original grey and black colours, and he brought back the more slow-paced, methodical Undertaker for this match. It was good to see, and die-hard Undertaker fans I'm sure loved to see this, but it's also a double-edged sword. The Undertaker was trying to evolve ever since the 1996 Survivor Series, and he even talked about changing his attitude again after his match with Vader at the Royal Rumble, but instead of evolving, he decided to bring it back to the beginning for WrestleMania 13. This isn't a complaint, by the way. The Undertaker bringing back the original look of the dead man was a highlight of Mania 13. Sid cut a promo before the match where he said he's the one man who isn't afraid of the darkness. He wasn't afraid of The Undertaker, and Sid will still be the master and ruler of the world after this title match. After both men made their entrances, they square up to each other. The match is just about to get underway, but here comes Bret Hart again, and he has a few things he needs to say. Bret says that Shawn's sitting out here with a pussyfoot injury and he should go back home and try to find his smile again. Bret then warns HBK to stay out of the match. The Hitman then tells the Phenom that when The Undertaker closed the cage door on him during the Raw's War title match, the Phenom also closed the door on their friendship. From now on, Bret and The Undertaker will operate under a new set of rules. Sycho Sid is up next. Bret says Sid's WWF Championship belongs to Bret, and Sycho Sid is nothing but a fraud. Everyone in the building knows that Bret's the best there is, best there was, and best there ever will be, and Sid doesn't want to hear it. Bret ends up getting smacked and he takes a powerbomb as well. The crowd pops and Shawn laughs on commentary. Sid tells Bret to get his whining ass out of the ring, And after Sid gets done kicking Taker's ass, he'll invite Bret back down to the ring. Undertaker decides to begin the match there and then, and the bell finally rings to start the WrestleMania main event. Sid whips Taker into the corner, but the Phenom gets a boot up. A flurry of corner strikes get followed up with a corner splash, and Sid takes a body slam in the middle of the ring. Undertaker then hits old school, he goes for another splash, but Sid catches his opponent and he applies a bear hug. A bear hug this early into the match isn't the best of ideas. Over a minute and a half of bear hugging action can feel like an eternity, and the WWF break up the broadcast by showing Shawn Michaels on commentary. Incredibly, Sid applies another 2 bear hugs when the Undertaker breaks free, but thankfully the pace quickens up a little when Sid hits a big boot before pushing the dead man out of the ring. Sid then tries to slam the Phenom through the table and the Undertaker gets his back rammed into the ring post. Vince McMahon then conveniently remembers that Sid and the Undertaker requested that this match be a no disqualification match. Back in the ring, Sid puts Undertaker in a camel clutch. The champ then comes off the second rope with a double axe handle. When Taker starts to fight back, he gets put right back down with a power slam. Sid then lines up a leg drop, and before doing so, he walks over to the Undertaker to call a spot or tell Taker to move or something. Who knows? There's definite blatant communication here before Sid hits the dead man, and afterwards, Taker gets choked at the ropes. The crowd gets a reason to cheer when Taker pulls off his jumping clothesline, but you get the feeling that the audience are pretty much ready to go home, especially when Sid instantly goes back in the driver's seat. The two men fight on the outside, and Sid's the third competitor to take a bump over the guardrail tonight. Taker then throws Sid into the steps, but as soon as the match gets back inside the ropes, Sid goes back on offense. Sid applies a modified chinlock using both hands to clamp down on Undertaker's face, and man, this just hasn't been good at all. A power slam from the Undertaker gets a smattering of applause, and the dead man applies a nerve lock. Sid then gets up and he tries a big boot, but Taker counters with a clothesline. A double big boot floors both men, and once again, to break up the monotony, the WWF shows Shawn Michaels watching the match on his monitor. Sid takes to the skies with a top rope double axe handle and a flying clothesline. His third attempt at an aerial attack gets countered. Sid instantly comes back with a body slam, but Taker counters another top rope attack and Sid gets slammed to the mat. Taker then pulls off a diving clothesline of his own that did look good. Taker signals for the end and he goes for a tombstone, but Sid counters and the Phenom takes his own move. He's still able to kick out at 2 though. The two fight on the outside again, and Bret Hart returns with a steel chair, getting some revenge for that powerbomb earlier on. Bret gets pulled away by officials, and when the match gets back in the ring, Taker hits a chokeslam. Sid kicks out of the follow-up pin. Sid then finds an opening and he goes for the powerbomb, but Bret Hart shows up one more time, and Sid ends up getting his neck snapped across the top rope. The Phenom takes advantage, he nails a tombstone piledriver, and the match is over. The Undertaker becomes WWF Champion at WrestleMania 13 after a pretty boring main event, no other way to say it. I know this one has its fans, but for a WrestleMania main event, I felt it was an absolute slog to get through. The two matches beforehand didn't help matters either, but Sid and Taker also had no story going into this one. It felt like fans only stuck around to see The Undertaker win the belt. Taker celebrates with the championship as WrestleMania 13 goes off the air. It's a bit unfair to say that WrestleMania 13 was a one-match show because the other matches really had a lot going against them, from their placement on the card, the lack of meaningful stories, and bouts being given way too much time with matches lasting between 10 and 20 odd minutes. It's a lot to ask of fans to sit through a series of long matches without a few shorter ones to break things up. Hart vs Austin saved WrestleMania from being a disaster though. The tag title match wasn't bad either. Watching this back today though made me realise that the Sid vs Taker match was actually worse than I remember it, and most other matches on the card were forgettable too, including the Chicago street fight. WrestleMania 13 is remembered for Bret Hart vs Steve Austin and Taker holding the belt at the very end of the show, and if I'm totally honest, this is all you really need to see from this event. WCW Uncensored the week prior might be an overall better show, but nothing could top the submission match. With that being said, I do have a soft spot for this show because this was when I was totally invested in the World Wrestling Federation again, and I love this era of the company. But watching it back now and being truthful with myself, it's not a great show. But that's going to do it for this one, guys. Join me for Reliving the War on Thursday, where we'll see what happens with the Hitman, and we'll hopefully learn about the Undertaker's first challenger for the World Wrestling Federation Championship. Thanks for watching this one, I hope you enjoyed it, and take care.